Hi everyone. We're just going to get started now since most of the people seem to be here. Welcome to our workshop addressing gender inequalities within MUN. I'm Dokyong and I am a senior at Taipei American School. I joined TAS's MUN program in 6th grade and the school's Girlup club in 9th grade. And I was inspired to hold this workshop with Megan as internalized sexism and misogyny is a very important issue that I'd like to discuss, especially in programs like MUN, which I believe can lead us to a step in the right direction.
Hi, my name is Megan, and I'm also a rising senior at Taipei American School and an officer of the Girlup Club at TAS. MUN and Girlup are both really important to me, and I'm looking forward to being able to share some lessons I've learned and have a really productive and meaningful workshop today. While we go over the agenda, please type your name and where you're from in the chat. So here's an outline of our agenda for today. After we finish up with our introductions, we're going to discuss Girlup and Goal 5, go into defining some of the terms and ideas that are central to our presentation, talk a little bit about our own personal experiences with this topic, and open the floor up to a group discussion. And then we're going to go over some scenarios and how to respond to them, and end with some time for a summary and Q&A. So if you have any questions during the presentation, you can put them in the chat, and we'll be answering as many as we can at the end of the presentation. So you might be wondering from the title of this workshop, what is Girlup? Girlup is a UN organization that has the mission of empowering girls and women and fighting sexism. Girlup also takes the form of clubs in schools. As we said earlier, we're both officers for the Girlup Club at our school. And each year our club hosts discussion groups, plans activities to fundraise for and promote gender equality. And our key event every year is the Leadership Summit, which is modeled from the official Girlup Leadership Summit. And we feature workshops like this one on issues relating to feminism and gender equality. So the key SDG that we built our presentation on is Goal 5, which is gender equality and empowerment for women and girls. So the main parts of Goal 5 we're going to be focusing on today are 5.5 and 5.C, which focus on supporting and empowering women and girls at all levels and ensuring equal representation in decision-making. So what exactly do we mean by gender equality within MUN? To answer this question, we're going to watch a short video. But before we watch the video, let's talk about MUN in committee and gender equality in MUN in committee and debate.
So when you think about gender inequality within MUN, you're probably thinking about the committee issues that we see. And we think that problems regarding gender inequality within MUN can be present on multiple levels. It's not just about the committee issues like reproductive rights, forced child marriages, and etc. Not only do we often detach ourselves from the issues that we talk about, we often forget that these issues that we discuss and draft resolutions for impact people's actual lives. And in our cases, our ignorance is prevalent through what we say and the language that we use. For instance, we can see this when people reduce women's experiences to a statistic in a speech, or when boys in debate simply state that the pressure of motherhood doesn't exist. We need to check our privilege and remind ourselves of the careful consideration we need for the terms and the solutions that we draft. But even aside from simply the discussion that we have for these topics and the language that we use, we think this problem exists on a greater level. People might believe that there isn't an issue for gender inequality within MUN because the program is literally about equality. But we see these issues exist when we're filling leadership roles, or when we see our attitudes and behavior towards women in such roles. So, first on leadership roles. This question, what would the world's top tables look without men, is one that was posed by Elle Magazine's #MoreWomen campaign. On the left, you see a photo of the House of Commons in London, which is filled with politicians. But unfortunately, the answer to this question is empty. In this photo where the male politicians are photoshopped out, you can see that there are very few female politicians. Even though the politicians were filling the room in the first photo, in the second photo, you see that there's very few females in the actual room. So the questions that we need to ask then is, Why is it important to have women in leadership roles? But secondly, what about prioritizing capability in candidates? So first on why it's important to have women in these leadership roles. Well, politicians are supposed to reflect the population's views and create/vote for legislation that the population supports. But we have to realize that the current system does not do this on a fair basis. It's absurd that women make up 50% of the population, but as UN Women finds, only 24.3% of all national parliamentarians were women as of February 2019. Women right now simply don't have equal opportunities in filling such roles. As for the second question, what about prioritizing capability in candidates, which is often a critique that people rise when people say that women need to fill more roles. We need to realize that once again, the current system isn't fair. Many people in power get their positions because of the greater experiences that they've received. This disproportionately harms women because in many cases, they are often as capable. It's just the lack of opportunities which places women in this vicious cycle where they don't have any opportunities and continuously don't get the years of experiences that men have. Note that as we've seen in the photo in the previous slide, this issue is on a great scale. We think MUN can take the first step in solving this issue because of the focus of gender equality in one of the SDGs, and it's a platform that has passionate people who may become the world's next leaders. So now we're going to be watching a short clip on 5 things you can do to improve gender equality in leadership.
In 2015, every United Nations member state made the commitment to ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership. This builds on previous international commitments like the 1995 Beijing Platform for Action. The rationale is not just equity, fairness, and rights and representation, but also because it makes for stronger governance and better economic outcomes. The diversity dividend is well documented. In the private sector, more women in senior managerial positions and on boards correlates with an increased return on investment. In governance bodies, gender balance correlates with increased emphasis on long-term growth drivers, like environmental sustainability, education, and health. So with such a strong case for gender balance, what's the current state of play? 1 in 4 parliamentarians is now female. Only 1 in 5 speakers of parliament or government ministers is a woman. And less than 7% of country leaders are women. In the private sector, almost 1/3 of companies globally have no women at all in board positions. A new index provides some insight. In a survey of 10,000 respondents in 2019, more than half expressed discomfort with women as leaders in both corporate and political life. So with progress this slow and challenges persisting, what works? Research reveals that temporary special measures and gender quotas are the strongest means to level the playing field. 3/4 of countries in the top 50 for women's political representation have some kind, and women who benefit from quotas are just as qualified as men. In the private sector, women's representation on boards has increased significantly with the introduction of quotas. You can check your country's record on the Corporate Women Directors International website. So what can you do to help meet your country's commitment to women's participation in leadership and decision-making? First, ask for the data so you know the current state of women's representation in your country. Check the Parline open source database of the Interparliamentary Union. Second, you can promote your government's commitment to SDG 5 and urge your colleagues to do the same. Third, you can support the adoption of temporary special measures and quotas. Enforcement is, of course, the critical next step. Fourth, make your parliament a gender-sensitive workplace by advocating for family-friendly on-site childcare, toilet facilities, nursing rooms, and paid parental leave, so all parliamentarians, both women and men, can fulfill family responsibilities. Finally, You can commit today to act as a mentor, sponsor, and guide to help ensure more women run for office. It's time to act. What will you commit to today?
So as you can tell from the video, it's not just filling these roles that we need to emphasize, it's also the attitudes we portray that need to be changed for the better, for true change to be seen for women in positions of power. So now we're going to spend some time talking about our own experiences with this issue. So I'll start. I'll share a story from when I was a chair at an overseas conference last year. In my committee, there were 3 chairs, and I was the only female chair in my committee, so both my co-chairs were male. And during the conference, I received comments from some of my delegates that I should be more friendly and smile more. And I was confused because I saw that my 2 male co-chairs were behaving in the exact same way as me with a serious tone and trying to maintain a professional environment because it was a serious issue. So I was confused and didn't know why they were targeting me specifically with these kinds of comments. So although this is more subtle, it is a form of sexism because women in positions of power and leadership are often told that they need to be more friendly, more likable, more polite in order for people to take them seriously, while men who are assertive and serious are seen as leaders and professionals. So that's an example of one double standard that has existed here.
In one of my experiences of subtle sexism, I was working with a male partner for an MUN project, and he kept on failing to complete his tasks on time. I started reminding him because of the multiple times he had went past the deadline, or he would simply not do any of the work that we had assigned and decided to finish by a certain stage. And he simply responded to my request by saying phrases like calm down or chill out, even when I felt that I was being completely reasonable or when I felt like I was being level-headed. This is another form of subtle sexism because one, it continues a double standard that women are too emotional and thus can't handle issues. Although if a guy calls people out on not finishing their tasks, people would not tell them to chill out, and instead they would be seen as a leader. But secondly, it shifts the blame to the woman and makes them feel like they're the ones who are being unreasonable when really you are being perfectly reasonable.
So an experience that we both shared was last year we were part of a secretariat team for an MUN conference, and we were having a meeting with the rest of the team to pick chairs for the conference. And what happened was that the room got very heated with people arguing over who to pick, people trying to voice their opinions all at once, and it became pretty clear that there was a trend in the room where the guys were the ones dominating the conversation and the girls couldn't really get what they wanted to say. And it went to the point that our conference director, who's one of the teachers at our school, had to step in and tell the guys to let the girls talk more. So this is an example of a more clearly defined issue of gender inequality in a position of leadership, because oftentimes, whether this be in an MUN meeting or a board meeting of a company in the future, women are often feel like their voices aren't heard as much and they have to struggle more to get their voices heard by the rest of the team.
Yeah, and we definitely saw signs of this happening and there becoming like a fallout or crisis because of the fact that everyone started standing up in order to assert their dominance, and we could see that the males were trying to overpower the females, and whenever a female tried to speak, she was just cut off. And although it's great that a director was able to intervene and ensure that our voices were being heard, it is worrisome that without the director, perhaps would things have been different. And it is also worrisome than the fact that they were continuing these attitudes and behaviors despite like multiple people encouraging them to listen to everyone's voices rather than continuously stating their own. So now we're going to go over some terms and ideas that we want to talk about in this workshop. And just a quick disclaimer before we go on to these terms and ideas, there may be some generalizations throughout this presentation, mainly about the power dynamics and terms like mansplaining, which is based on the traditional power dynamic of men being the ones overpowering and controlling women and ensuring that their voices are not being heard. So the first idea is double standards, which is when men and women are judged differently in the same role. For instance, in a MUN setting, if a delegate is loud and confident when they're speaking, a male might be described as a power delegate, assertive, a leader, or charismatic, while a woman who may be doing the exact same thing might be described as bossy, aggressive, unlikable, or annoying. This is harmful as it places a man in a positive light and a woman in a negative light when they are literally doing the exact same thing. And it also continues this problematic notion that a woman needs to be a certain way and act a certain way in order to be liked by others, and that's a priority that a woman should keep in mind. But another instance of double standards that we see, which is not limited to MUN, it's even in settings like school or even in settings like church or other environments, are in regards to dress code. Requirements for men are often very simple, like simply a suit and tie or wearing formal dress shoes, but requirements for women are often a lot lengthier. This includes wearing a skirt that's longer than your knee, or wearing pantsuits, not showing your shoulders, having your hair and makeup in an appropriate manner, and keeping a lack of jewelry on. Many who argue that these long guidelines are necessary for women say that they should be in place so that the males are not distracted in these settings. But this argument is inherently sexist because it makes women cover up rather than making men be able to control their desires. The same idea which continues the, oh, but what was she wearing question when there's a case of rape or sexual assault. And secondly, it's making women believe that they have to dress a certain way in order to be accepted in society, which should not be the case. But going on to a global scale of these double standards, we've seen this in many instances when women and men are judged differently in the same role or held to different standards. We see this on a political level in media coverage on Hillary Clinton's red power suit during the 2016 US presidential election, and also media coverage on President Tsai as a single female politician in Taiwan. So on the first example on media coverage on Hillary Clinton's power suit. This picture is very famous because of Hillary Clinton's famous red power suit that she wore onto her debate against President Donald Trump. And it says that everyone thought that she was sending a message of her being passionate. And we need to consider the history behind women in politics wearing pantsuits. Fashion historian Heather Vaughn Lee says that starting in the 1970s, the woman's power suit came into vogue, spurred by the large number of women in the workforce. And we need to understand the fact that the convention for women to wear skirts was broken only after Senator Moseley Braun showed up unknowing of the rule. Ultimately, the reason why we were able to change this in the US was because of a signaling mechanism. Power suits were developed in order to convey women's economic and professional power and to put them on more equal footing with men in the workplace. So it has served us a lot of good, and it has raised a lot of awareness on the issue that women have regarding how they face a lot more discrimination and oppression in these settings. But we also need to consider the fact that this inherently, the constant evaluation that they face is laced in sexism. It's the same sexism that other female politicians have faced. And when she wears other outfits, she's constantly accused of not doing more to look more feminine or fashionable. This is upholding a double standard because while women have to be so much more careful and mindful about what they need to wear, meanwhile, their male counterparts can focus on their policies and operational parts of their campaigns. And you can clearly see that a lot more media focuses on what women are wearing rather than what their policies say. This double standard is harmful because of the fact that you're only going to increase more focus on what they are wearing or what they're choosing to wear rather than what they are actually advocating for, which is the job of a president. But another instance of this that we see is in Taiwan and President Tsai's election. In a 2016 opinion piece by Xinhua News Agency, it stated that as a single female politician, Tsai Ing-wen does not have the emotional burden of love, of family, or children, so her political style and strategies are displayed to be more emotional, personal, and extreme. The BBC responds that the report continued that her quote unquote erratic behavior influenced her political style and advised that she should take that into consideration rather than focus on long-term goals for Taiwan. And there's actually a lot of support for President Tsai. One major question that we need to consider is what exactly does President Tsai's private life have to do with the way she governs Taiwan? There really is no link, and you wouldn't ask this question to a male politician. But sadly, the unfortunate reality is that this issue has continued in 2019. Many have stated that President Tsai isn't qualified to talk about the next generation because she doesn't have children of her own, which is completely absurd because of the fact that you don't need to have children in order to understand the struggles of a parent. There was so much backlash that President Tsai made a Facebook post dedicated to this, in which she stated that perhaps we haven't done enough or performed sufficiently, and I'm willing to accept criticism and continue working hard for policies. But launching personal attacks on the basis of gender or fertility status is an act that negates women and undermines the efforts of the government. This is especially because you don't have this type of pressure of motherhood for men, and this only continues the issue where women are less likely to represent people in politics.
So the second issue that we want to discuss is called mansplaining. A quick disclaimer, despite the name of the term, it's not always man to woman. It's called mansplaining because of the majority of experiences that follow this power dynamic. And it's often not intentional. Many times men aren't aware what they're saying falls into this category. So what is mansplaining? It is when a man explains, usually condescendingly, something to a woman that he assumes he has more knowledge on than her, even when he actually doesn't. So some examples from a leadership context. If a woman were talking about her experiences with sexism in MUN, or from other leadership roles, and a man were to dismiss her opinion and disregard the fact that she has more personal experience with the issue and the fact that there are systemic issues regarding discrimination against women in leadership roles, this would be mansplaining. This could take the form of, oh, there's no sexism in MUN, it's literally about equality. Or maybe if you spoke up more, you would get more leadership roles. So as I said earlier, oftentimes men aren't aware that they're mansplaining. So this chart was made by a woman named Kim Goodwin in response to male colleagues asking her if they were mansplaining. So you can see if not always explaining something to a woman is always mansplaining. So if she asked you to explain it, then it's clearly not mansplaining. But if you don't have more relevant experience, and most men with her education and experience would already know this, and you did not ask if she needed it explained, then it's most likely or definitely mansplaining. So one example of mansplaining can be seen from these images of quotes by US Republican lawmakers, who are almost all male, discussing the issue of rape. All of these quotes are incredibly problematic, not to mention factually incorrect. First, they trivialize and dismiss the traumatic experiences of victims of sexual assault, who have already been through serious suffering and do not need people to defend their attackers or downplay the severity of their trauma. Secondly, there are scientifically incorrect ideas here. The idea that the female body would, quote, shut down or, and unquote, a rape is simply false, and rape kits are not for, quote, cleaning out, but for collecting evidence from the victim's body to prosecute the rapist. In this case, the male lawmakers who have not been through or understand this kind of trauma, as seen by their ignorance on the facts of the issue, are mansplaining the issue to women who have actually been through such a terrible experience. In another example, in both of these Twitter threads, a woman shares her opinion regarding a certain issue, whether that be climate change on the left or women in tech on the right. When a man tries to mansplain by questioning her qualifications and opinion, she shuts him down by explaining her qualifications, a PhD in science, or literally being the author of the article he told her she didn't understand. Another important issue that we must bring up is girls supporting girls. Misogyny, surprisingly, does not always take place from men to women. There's often internalized misogyny that girls have, because there's this myth that there are a limited amount of spots for girls as leaders or power delegates, so women are often pitted against each other for leadership roles or in debate. So some girls believe that you have to fight other girls for that spot by putting them down. Putting them down can look like judging their appearance, being jealous of their success, and not supporting them when they're struggling. And this is extremely counterproductive because it's There are already additional hardships that women in leadership roles face, and if they don't have the support system of other women in the room who understand what they're going through, it's going to make it much more difficult for them. So if you find yourself in a situation where you feel like you need to put them down, don't. Support your fellow female MUNers, call out sexism, and back them up when they're being talked over, and everyone will feel more empowered that way. So now we're going to move into a discussion on the issues we've talked about. We have 2 questions prepared, and if you'd like to share, please use the raise hand function and we will call on you. So the first question is, what are some instances of sexism you've experienced or witnessed in MUN or other leadership roles? So again, you can use the go to the participant bar and select yes if you would like to answer this question, and we'll call on you to unmute your microphone. Another question we might pose is, what are some instances of sexism you've witnessed on a global scale? If you don't want to share using microphone, please feel free to share your answers in the chat so everyone can see.
Lessa, is that how you say your name? Sorry.
Hi, it's Lisa. It's fine. It's fine. It's absolutely understandable. I think from a global scale, like there's quite a conversation that's happening in the chat right now, where we're talking about how women, quote, women don't always share their skill with the world, end quote. And I think from a global scale, what we need to take into consideration is that, like for me, for example, right? If I'm trying to apply for a position and I'm saying that, okay, I'm going to work 20 hours a week on this, but okay, like say, for example, if I work 8 hours a day, I'm not just doing 8 hours a day of work because I'm expected to do other work in the house, right? Because like it's established that girls are put to work more often than boys are. And what stems from that is that women have their energy resources depleted way faster than boys do. And it's an established fact that you have countries where women don't get to go to school, or they don't get to go and explore and like quote unquote use their skill and share their skill with the world, because they have the burden to do other things that men do not take up, and there's a disproportionate amount. So for me personally, I haven't experienced that intense of an experience, but at the same time, I do know that I can't devote as much time as I would like to, quote, sharing my skill with the world, because I have other things to do that my male counterparts wouldn't be doing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I definitely agree with everything you said. Like, I think what we have to realize is that I was just reading what was happening in the chat, and I think that what we have to realize is the systemic discrimination that has been against women for so long. And that is why even sometimes when they are using their skill, they're not able to reach these places as equally as men could do. And I do see that definitely men are more easily able to like win in political elections and such because of the fact that they don't have to care like their likability, their appearance, which is sometimes a factor that people unfortunately do have in these elections and like voting for people. And I do think that it is important to have equal education, but the problem has to stem from the problem right now is the fact that there is an unfair system in place, and we need to have more women in these roles who are often as capable and who often have the same amounts of like credentials and are often able to actually be in these spots. It's just a system that we need to be able to reform while also ensuring that we're able to have equal education for women and men. Does anyone else want to share before we move on?
I would like to speak.
Sure.
So one of these things that I think is a global issue concerning gender inequality is that some people consider men to be more skilled in certain things. And men might not actually have any skills in that, but they're considered more skilled and able to do certain things just because of their gender. For example, I had this case in my school. My class was organizing some like really big mass activities, and my teacher told me to go to other classes and just jot down the students who wanted to participate. And she told me to take one of my male classmates as if I wasn't able to do it myself on my own. And I felt really angry because I don't think that in this very simple tasks, men should be considered more skilled than women just because of their sex. And I think that this might be the case in many other occasions with many other people. And I just want to express this with all of you.
Yeah,
Thank
definitely.
you for, yeah.
Hey, can I speak next?
Yeah.
Yes.
Megan, did you want to say something before, or?
Oh no, I was just saying I completely agree. That definitely is an issue.
Okay, yeah. Who wanted to go next?
Yes. Hello all, my name is Archana and I am from India. So today I'd like to share my experience. This one time when I was in primary school, there was this position, a prefect position, and my teacher promised me that you were going to get this position. And later on in the ceremony, my classmate, one of a guy, he got this. And when later I asked my teacher that what happened, like this position was given to me, and how has he now got it? So the only answer she had was like, he's a guy, so it's really, so he was entitled to get it. Another experience was there was this debate competition, inter-school debate competition, and me and one of my classmates, we both prepared for it. There were supposed to be two students going, but then later on it was told to us that only one could go. So then the teacher told me that because he was a guy, his voice was more likely to be heard, more confident. So yeah, he went there, and I was told that maybe next time and all that. And that was the only response my teachers had for me, and it's like so sexist. I was so confused and frustrated. But yeah, there have been such experiences, and I don't know what to say. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for
definitely.
sharing.
Thank you for sharing. Since we're running out of time, we're going to continue on, but thank you for your input and all of your experiences. We can definitely relate to a lot of the issues that you talked about. So now we're going to talk about how to respond to the ideas that we've just covered. And another disclaimer is we realize that everyone has different experiences and may handle issues differently, but these tips are just ones that have worked for us or helped us. The next few slides are going to be divided based on one, if you're the person facing the issue, or if you're a bystander in these situations. Okay, so first, if you're facing a double standard, understand that their standards are flawed, so don't let other people's judgment make you any more self-conscious or want to change yourself to fit their standards. You should focus on yourself and question the double standards by having the uncomfortable conversation on if you're being judged differently because of your gender. Some things to consider before you have this conversation are time. For instance, is this something that you need to say at this exact moment right now? Or is it something that you can deal with later by setting up an appointment or a separate meeting with them? Also consider the trade-off. Is this a professional relationship where you need to work with them for some time? This is going to help you determine how exactly to approach them and what words you would exactly say. Lastly, it helps to talk to others at the scene, as others may have a different view from you or agree with you and give you their support or their input on how you could talk to that person. I think it also definitely helps to ensure that when you talk to that person, you make sure that you talk about your personal experiences and your personal feelings on why they made you feel uncomfortable or why you felt that there's a double standard. And secondly, if you're the person who's watching someone facing a double standard, make sure you talk to both people and question if there seems to be a a double standard because of the fact that you're not explicitly part of that exchange. And if there seems to be a double standard, point out why it's harmful to continue this and why they should stop, or why this double standard is harmful for like women and also harmful for the person to continue. And if the person chooses to speak out on their own, be supportive and listen to what they're saying. Hold the other person accountable, or if you yourself were called out, then don't continue the double standard in the future, and understand and empathize with the person.
So in the case that you are being mansplained to, the most important thing to remember is to remain calm and collected and remain the authority in the situation. State the facts, cite your sources, and explain why you're the credible and knowledgeable authority in this situation. This can be something like, oh, actually, I had an experience where I went through the same situation and this is what happened to me. Or actually, in the past, it's been proven that this is actually a systemic problem. The unfortunate reality is that they might still not believe you or might complain about you behind your back, but you have to learn to ignore that because their opinion doesn't change the facts. So if you're watching someone being mansplained to, it's important to remember that bystanders have the power to turn the conversation back to the person whose opinion has been dismissed. So if you see someone's opinion has been totally shut down and the conversation has been moving in a totally different direction, you have the power to say, actually, I was interested in what she was saying, and turn the conversation back to them and let them voice their opinions once again. If they're still struggling, you can back them up. Say, actually, they did a lot of research on this topic and they have personal experience, so I think they're the one who's right here. It can be something more formal, less formal, depending on what kind of situation you're in, but just make sure that they know there's someone there for them in the group, and that'll help them a lot. So now we're going to go through some scenarios that we've come up with based on personal experience or watching this happen to others. So we're going to practice utilizing the tips for the terms and ideas that we've gone through, and just use the raise hand function once again, and we'll call on you. So this first scenario, Dokyong, do you want to go over the first scenario?
Yeah, sure. So you're chair for the Security Council. Across the room, you notice that the male member of adult delegation is the only one speaking on behalf of the group. When his female partner attempts to speak, he cuts her off and interjects with his own ideas. How do you respond? Anna?
Thanks. Well, I would just treat it, I've never been a chair, but I would just treat it like he was just putting down his partner no matter what their gender, because that's not okay even if his partner was just a male as well. So just say, hey, just make sure that you are both talking equally.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect response. We have a second scenario.
So you and your co-secretariat member are at a chair training practice making comments on the chairs, and you notice that your partner is judging the female chair differently, asking her to appear more friendly, tone down her voice, and dress more appropriately, comments that they're not making about the male chair. How do you respond? Jana, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, I would say I think she's fine. I think she's doing great and so on. Just as if it's my opinion about her.
Yeah, definitely. You can be that supportive ally in that scenario.
Okay, so now we're just going to have a quick summary of what we brought to you in this workshop.
So as a female MUNer, the most important thing to remember is to be confident, and remember that other people's opinions don't change the facts of a situation. So don't let other people's opinions and words lower your self-confidence, and rather focus on being the best delegate, chair, or secretariat member you can be. And the best way to achieve this confidence is with a strong support system. So always support and uplift other girls, and remember that it's not a competition between who can be the best girl delegate in the room. You're all there to support each other. And also call out sexism when you witness or see it. Like Dokyong explained earlier, it's important to always consider the context and what the best way to approach it is, but always make sure other people know that you are supportive of them.
And importantly, as well, as an ally, pay attention to the balance of power when you work in groups. If you see someone being talked down to or silenced, uplift them and make sure that their voice is being heard. But also pay attention to your own behavior. Ask yourself, are you mansplaining? Are you overpowering others' voices? Are you judging female MUNers differently from male MUNers? And call out sexism when you witness it. The most important thing you have to do, though, is continue educating yourself and holding yourself accountable. Make sure that you're learning about the systemic discrimination that women have faced and the issues on how you can actually solve this issue and better yourself as an ally. But also on a global scale, as we stated before, these issues aren't exclusive to MUN. Even outside of MUN, practice being an ally by reading the news and questioning any double standards or mansplaining and raise awareness of such issues. But remember to go beyond selectivism, performative activism, and educate yourselves on the systemic discrimination. Although women around the world may be in some positions of power, yet definitely in significantly lower numbers, they still face many issues, including double standards, objectification, pay gaps, and etc., that we probably cannot fit in this 45-minute workshop. I'm not sure how much time we have now, but are there any questions?
We have around 4 minutes left.
Okay.
We have about 2 minutes left, actually, please, everybody. And if everyone could switch on their cameras, I'd quite like to just take a screenshot whilst you're answering questions. Thank you.
Then should we just move on to closing?
So since we couldn't really get to the questions live in the workshop, if you have more questions that we couldn't get to, or you want to discuss even more on this issue, we'd be happy to talk. These are our social media handles and our emails if you want to send us an email or a message. We also have our school's Girlup chapter, and also you could visit girlup.org if you want to learn more about these issues. So these are some articles we found online that are helpful to us and are relevant to the presentation. So these are like 7 issues you may experience if you're a woman in Model UN, 3 women's perspectives on this issue, and also an example of some girls in a top Model UN club.
Also, remember that this issue exists outside of just MUN, as we mentioned multiple times. This link is an open letter about social sexism in debate, and you can easily access all these links by typing tinyurl.com/goal5, which is gender equality SDG, and typing NO1234, which is just shorthanded for a number. Thank you for coming to our session and for being so passionate about these issues. We had a really fun time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan and Dokyong. I would just, we do need to finish. We've got about 1 minute. So if everyone could just switch on their cameras for me, please. And I would like to take a screenshot. Look beautiful and handsome. Smile nicely, everybody. Moving to the second page. Keep smiling. Perfect. Thank you everyone for participating. If you are posting anything on social media, please remember to use our hashtags. And I think it's time to move on to the next session. I'd also just like to thank our interpreters for doing a great job. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.